Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to tonight's second bonus. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second bonus, shall we? Alright, so last night I had a really interesting phone call. Probably an hour and 20 minutes. Gentleman who we are going to refer to him as Richard. That is not his name. And we are going to leave him and his friend both kind of anonymous. So Richard will be Richard, the gentleman that I spoke to. Friend is unnamed. And I'll tell you why. This experience occurred in 1979 when Richard was 19 years old. He was getting ready to go to police academy. He retired as a state police officer for the state of North Carolina. His best friend that he had grown up with from kindergarten on. They have known each other all their lives. They still are friends to this day. He pursued a different career, both kind of in politics. State police officer, obviously, you deal in the political field, but his friend that was with him on this experience pursued to engage in the political realm of North Carolina. He was not a governor, he was not a senator, but he is fairly well known in the state of North Carolina. He's also retired as well. So this, like I said, occurred in 1979. He is retired and he's been a subscriber for about 4 years. You guys have probably communicated with him in the comment section, to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure most of you have who are in the comment section. Excuse me. Since 10th grade, they had kind of made a plan that when they graduated, they were going to hike the Appalachian Trail. So from Georgia to Maine. And that was their kind of dream. And the reason why they decided to do it at the right of the summer of graduation and not later was because they decided, we're both probably going to go to college. I'm probably going to go to police academy. So let's make this trip the last hurrah of our childhood, teen years to where adulthood starts. And that was their goal. Neither one had drank alcohol at the time or partook in kind of any illegal drugs. Excuse me. And so a big reason why he wants to share and why he wants to get it out but remain anonymous is because his wife had passed away 3 months ago. And he sits alone every night in his home, listening to my channel and a couple of other channels, and thinking about his experience. He said that he will never be able to watch the movie 300, and after this upload is done, you will see exactly why. So that's the background of everything. Let's get into it. So 1979 comes around. Both of these guys graduate. And like I stated, they had decided, back in 10th grade, 9th or 10th grade, that they wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail as kind of like a step into adulthood. Their kind of last thing as teens, and this brings them into the adult world. Except they didn't end up hiking the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. What they did was they hiked in North Carolina into Tennessee, back into North Carolina. The Appalachian Trail kind of zigzags through both states for quite some time. And beautiful mountainous region. The experience happened in Swain County, which pretty much the whole county is woods, mountains, animals. It's just a hunter's paradise, a fisherman's paradise. Beautiful piece of God's country. So what they decide to do is they are going to start right from the beginning of where they can get access to the trail and hike for about a week down and heading towards the end or beginning. Now, the reason for that hike starting as a week is because they hike for a week and they hike out for a week. And that gives them 2 to 3 weeks to prepare for college and an internship in the capital of North Carolina, and for Richard, police academy. So their trip starts out beautiful. They really have no issues for the first 8 days. They hike down through, zigzagging through North Carolina and Tennessee. And he did say that maybe on the 6th day, at one point in the evening, there may have been some sort of weird event that occurred, but he doesn't want to chalk it up as having any kind of part to this. It may. They had been sleeping for the night in a tent, and they had heard this really strange kind of bellow. It wasn't any kind of wild animal either of them had ever heard or sense. And at first, they both kind of froze in the tent and looked at each other. And I think it was his friend. He believes that it was his friend or himself. He doesn't really remember who, but booger was brought up. Sounds like a booger. And they laughed and ended up going to bed. It was, just one of those kind of quick, scary moments. So they get up and they proceed to hike. They get to about the second or third cut in from Tennessee to North Carolina. And that's where they have to turn around. That's the 7th day. Midday is when they turn back and start hiking back out. And they kind of are regretting the length of time. They wished they had started a little earlier, so maybe they'd have 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out. But no turning back now, right? Now, along this trail is some lean-tos. He doesn't know if they're there anymore. He knows some of them had gotten torn down, or some had just been overcome by nature. Because back in 79, in the early 80s, the upkeep of the lean-tos and trails weren't that great. It's not what it is today. So some of these lean-tos had been in some real despair. What they have, it is the 70s, late 70s, 79, and so they have big backpacks. It's not like what we have nowadays, where a sleeping bag, will fold up to be like this big and you're warm as can be. They have sleeping bags that are like that big around, and they tie them to their bottom of their backpack. They are alternating days, of which will carry the tent bag, which is a bag with tent poles, like real metal tent poles. So that's, what they were carrying, and it made it a very interesting trip. So they decide that at one of the lean-tos, they're going to camp in one of them. They didn't do it on the way down, but on the way back, that's what we'll do. He believes that they were in Tennessee at the time of the first kind of notification or inkling that there was something stalking them. And that happened at night. They'd set up their tent, and they were sitting around their little fire, just talking and hanging out, and they heard a bunch of commotion behind them, and they had kind of frozen in fear. He was sitting facing his friend. His friend's on the opposite side of the fire, so Richard's got his back to the tent. His friend's got his back to the woods. And he looks at his friend and he says, "You need to come and sit next to me. Don't make any sudden movements or kind of any awareness that something is in the woods behind you right now." And he's trying to say that as like quietly and nonchalantly as possible, because what he sees is these glowing kind of amber or ember colored eyes. They're orange. He said they were the brightest orange I had ever seen. So I've heard people talk about Dogman's eyes being red and yellow and this color and that color. He said, "Jeff, these were a glowing orange." He said, "My buddy stood up and kind of pushed his stick into the fire and kind of stirred it around and circled over to the side and sat down next to Richard, almost to make it like, I'm going to stir the fire and, hang out and sit next to you, so whatever is behind me staring at us isn't aware that we know it's there." His buddy sits down next to him, and they are talking in kind of a code, they are talking in a code about what they're seeing, but really kind of nonchalantly, because for some reason he could tell both gentleman could tell that there was a sense of intelligence. And he said, as weird as that sounds, Jeff, how can you tell that something's intelligent by staring at these glowing orange eyes? He said it wasn't that. It wasn't a physical seeing it. It was definitely 100% mental and a little spiritual. So they're both looking at it, talking, and kind of laughing a little bit, fake laughing. And they notice the blink. It blinks its eyes. And his friend freaked out. Kind of, holy shit, real loud. What the hell is that? Richard, what is that? They did not bring any firearms with them. He said, I really, honestly, if we had, he goes, I don't know if we'd be alive today. He goes, but I'm kind of glad we didn't, because I don't think we'd be alive today. So as his friend's freaking out, it had blinked its eyes. It blinks again, and whatever, they can't tell about what it is, but whatever it is, growls and almost bluff charges them, or does bluff charge, but not to where it's out of the shadows, out of that light that's produced by the fire. And his friend both kind of backed up real quick because it moved super, super fast, and it was heavy and strong. His friend jumped back and actually landed on the tent, knocking it down. Richard had kind of fallen over from the momentum of his friend and the sighting of this kind of bluff charge. And his friend kind of gets up off the tent and he laughs. He laughs aloud because he had just knocked the whole tent over. And Richard kind of picks himself up and stands to look and see if he's okay. And he's got his eyes to whatever. And he helps his friend up. And as he helped his friend up, he said, I'll never forget it because I helped my friend up. And we both saw its eyes. And it was almost like it went from like two eyes staring at us to a 2.5 or 1.5, 1, nothing, gone. And we could hear it moving in the opposite direction of us, almost like it had come and then watched us, turned around and walked away. So they look at each other and whisper like, what the hell was that? Bears don't have glowing eyes. Deer don't have glowing eyes unless you shine a light. And they look back at the tent, and the tent is knocked over. So they fix the tent, and they're both kind of up, wide awake, terrified. They make the decision to, you sleep for a couple of hours, I'll stay out here. I'll sleep for a couple of hours, you stay out here. That goes on for the night, and they hear nothing more. They proceed to hike the next day, and that's all they can talk about is the night before. Like, what the hell was that? Did you see anything except those glowing eyes? Obviously, they were thinking about going into the woods to where it was standing and kind of taking a physical measurement, but they did not. So what they did was they kind of guessed from a distance, like, you stand down to that area and let me see, you know, how tall you were. Put your hand up, and then I'll do it, and we'll see if we get the same kind of height. We'll do it next to this tree. And they do, and they calculate maybe 7 to 8 feet in height, which a bear could stand on its hind legs, but not for that long. But they don't have glowing red or orange eyes. So they talk about it all day, and they put some distance between that area to where they're going now. And they get to another lean-to. They decide that, you know, we're going to crash in this one tonight. Whatever. They felt safer to crash in that lean-to. This lean-to was a pile of crap, he said. He said the roof had some weather damage to it, to where when it rained, you could tell when it rained, the rain came through and damaged some of the floor. And where the pitch was at the very beginning, the floor was not all the way up to that last pitch. So the lean-to kind of went at like an angular kind of pattern. But this side was shorter, and so that floor wouldn't get wet. It was dry. They could just tell that, you know, if it did rain, that they weren't going to be dry. They unpacked their gear for the night, kind of set up their sleeping bag. Mind you, they had hiked from about 8 in the morning till roughly 6, 7 o'clock. It was still light out, but it was getting really quick. It was going to be dark. They set up a fire pit. They kind of gathered some rocks, and they set up a fire pit, not underneath that little kind of awning of the lean-to, but a little bit away from it. So there's about a 6-foot gap between the fire pit and the lean-to. But they purposely set it in front of them. So almost as protection. Obviously, wild animals may be attracted to a fire if they see one, especially a predator. But more or less with that light, they're not used to the light out there. No animal will probably mess with them, and whatever they had seen the night before isn't going to mess with them. So they got their fire pit set. It's still light out. Dusk is upon them. And they need to get some kindling and some kind of bigger firewood for the night. So they kind of, you go, I'll stay here, then you go, and that's what we'll do. That way we have a couple of enough firewood to keep the fire going throughout the night. Because after that last night, they didn't want to take turns sleeping. They both were kind of very tired that hike day. And two, they didn't want to deal with, if they're sitting in the lean-to or on the edge of the lean-to staring out into the fire, nothing can get their back. Nothing can get them from up above. It's going to have to go through the fire, and at least they'll see it coming at them. They had sharpened some sticks to kind of make some crude spears. So his buddy goes looking for the first kind of set of kindling and bigger kind of logs. Mind you, they've got like a little kind of hatchet with them. So nothing majorly sharp, enough to break down some, little trees that are dead and such. So he goes out, and about 20 minutes later, he comes back to the campsite. And Richard looks at him, and he's like, "Where the hell have you been?" He's like, "You've been gone for 20 minutes. I was getting a little worried about you." He said, "I got up, I looked both ways on the trail to see where you went. I yelled your name." He goes, "Did you hear me yell your name?" And he goes, "No, I didn't hear that at all." And so he's kind of baffled. And his friend is kind of acting funny, but he can't really tell, what's going on. And he's like, "Are you sure you're all right?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He said, I went out in the woods. He said, "I gathered some kindling." He said, as I walked out further to get some larger sticks, he said, "I found this cool kind of boulder structure, naturally made, not made by a cryptid or man. Just how he said it was just this really cool looking kind of pattern with these boulders." He said, "And I kind of sat there for a minute and looked around." He goes, "It was a really cool place." He goes, "I felt comfortable there." And he said, "Then I finished picking up the sticks and came right back." He said, "If you go out and take X amount of steps and go that way," he goes, "you might see where the trail is that I took." And Richard said, "All right, I want to check it out, if it's that cool that you didn't hear me." Richard starts walking, and he's looking on the side of the trail for where his friend had gone through and kind of blazed his own trail. And he's got his kind of walking stick / spear with him, just walking. And he believes that he sees some brush kind of disturbed where his friend might have gone. So he's like, "Well, shit, there it is. I'm going to go check it out." And he starts walking, and he's, picking up some sticks. He's got some sticks under his arm like that, and he's got his hiking stick and / spear. And he walks for a good distance because he wants to see this formation of rock that his friend just is enamored by. He said, "My friend was just like, that's all he could talk about was like, and it was like the coolest thing he's ever seen. It was weird." So I go and I about gave up, he said, "but I heard someone call my name or whisper my name in front of me." He said, "So I knew it wasn't my buddy." He said, "It was in front of me." He said, "I dropped out of fear. I dropped my bundle of sticks. And I stood there," he said, "and I kind of took my spear in a spearing position and held it in front of me. And I yelled out, who's out there?" And he yells his friend's name. And he doesn't get a response. And he starts walking a little further. And he turns around to, he said, "I don't remember why I turned around." He said, "But I did." He said, I saw my bundle of sticks. And I walked a little bit further. He said, "I turned again and my sticks were gone." He said, "The sticks were just gone." And I stopped for a second and I looked around. And he goes, "I turned around to face the way I was going." He goes, "And Jeff, sure enough, there was that boulder formation my friend was talking about." He goes, "It wasn't there seconds before this. My sticks were back there, but now they're not there. This boulder formation wasn't there, but now it is there." He He said, so I started walking closer to it. And he said, I heard another whisper of my name. He said, and I stopped again. And he said, what I saw was this strange kind of pattern in front of me, in the air, over the boulders. He said it looked like a doorway. He said it wasn't a circle. He said it was like an arched kind of doorway. He said all of a sudden, the boulders weren't there. He said, and the landscape that I was just staring at was different, but not really. And the boulders were gone. He said, I couldn't make sense of it. He said, I walked a little bit closer to where I knew the boulders were. And he said, I was about 30 feet from the area of where these boulders were. He said, and all of a sudden, I'm looking, and in this dome thing where the boulders were, this doorway, he said it wasn't glowing. He said it wasn't doing anything except for, you could just see that it was different. It was different on the side here, it was different on the side here, and it was different above. But it was the same as where I am. But the landscape in that area of that arch was different. He said, and I saw something run from one side of that doorway to the other in front of me. And he said it was gray. He said it ran like a man. He said, but it was hairy and gray. And he said, I've heard people describe Dogman and Bigfoot to where they have some gray on them, or people have described Dogman as being a charcoal color. He said, no. He said, this was gray. And he said, I kind of jumped back and I held the spear. He goes, because I couldn't make any sense of what I had just seen. It was like if, in the way he said it, it'd be like if you were staring at a door and something or someone walked across that doorway. You can't see them on this side of you. You can see them when they're in front of it or beyond it. But the second they get to the other side of the doorway, you can't see them either. He said, I'm looking around because I couldn't make sense of what I'm seeing. He said, I quickly backed up as quick as I could, enough not to fall. He said, and I'm staring at this area where the boulders were and whatever it was that I had just seen. He said, and I kept backing up and I fell right on my ass. He said, and what I fell on was my bundle of sticks. And he said, as I fell, he goes, I sat up quick because in his head at that point, all he's thinking about is the thing that he had just seen run from one side of that little doorway, and in lack of a better word for it, I mean, the only other word you can use is portal, but it wasn't your atypical portal where people think it's a circle. This was literally a doorway, an arched doorway. He said, I fell and I quick had my stick and I turned to see. He goes, because Jeff, I thought whatever the hell that thing was somehow got behind me, even though I couldn't see it. He said, I turned and I looked and it was my bundle of sticks. He said, I quickly turned to look back at, this doorway thing, thinking whatever was gray and just ran in front was going to come out at me because I'm vulnerable. I'm on the ground. He said, and what I see is the boulder formation is back.
And he said, there's this man standing on the boulders. He said, and he's got to be 12 to 13 feet in height, double what I am. He goes, I'm 6'1". He said, the guy's huge. He said, he's almost like a Native American colored skin or Arab kind of skin. Not black like a black man would be, not white like a Caucasian, but that in between Arab or Native American. And he's just standing there staring at me. And he has this kind of weird kind of tunic on. And he's bald. He's got no facial hair and he's bald. He said in his eyes were the creepiest looking eyes. He said they were just jet black. He said there was no whites. They were just black. And he's like, I froze in terror. He goes, I just tripped over sticks that weren't there. Now I'm staring at a boulder formation that's huge. Like, there's like 4 boulders that are there, probably 20 feet around and about 8 feet in height. He said, and there's this giant of a man standing on these rocks. He said, I didn't know what to do. He said, and when I look and I'm staring at it, and he said, I saw his lips move. And he said, I heard my name again. And he said, he smiled at me. And he had teeth just like a shark. Like his teeth would fit together. He said, and they were sharp looking. He said they were pointed like canines. But his teeth would fit together. It was the scariest thing. He's black eyes, pointed teeth, and he's like 12 to 13 feet in height. And he said the everything, none of it made any sense. The only thing that was making any sense was the creep factor of this all, the terror that he's having. He said, all of a sudden, he said, I hear my buddy yelling in the distance for me. And I turn to look and see if my buddy's behind me because I can hear him. He said, but he is off in a distance. I wanted to see if he was coming through the woods towards me because I wanted him to see what I was staring at and hoping that he had his spear with him in case we had to, do combat with this thing. He said, and we would have lost. He goes, there was no doubt about if that thing decided at that moment that it wanted to have me dead, he could have just tore me apart. He said, so I turned to see where my friend was and I turned back. He said, and that doorway and man were gone. He said, all that was there was the rocks. He said, I hear my buddy yell again and I yell his name and I'm like, come here. I'm here. I found the rocks. And he can hear his buddy go, talking, oh, you found them, da-da-da. He's walking through the woods and he's staring in the direction his friend's coming. His back is to the rocks. He's picking up his bundle of sticks because he wants to get the sticks back the hell out of here and talk to his friend about what he had just seen on their way out. His friend comes walking up to him and he said, you found the rocks. Isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? Like, he goes, did you fall asleep? He goes, because I think that's what happened to me. He goes, I must have sat on the rocks and kind of dozed off. He goes, is that what happened to you? And he said, kind of, sort of. Richard said, kind of, sort of. Let me tell you, when we get back to to the camp, and they're walking out, and he said to his friend, he goes, "Did you sit like on those rocks?" He said, "Nothing was out of the ordinary for you. Nothing at all. Kind of, you felt safe. You didn't see anything." And he's like, "I didn't see nothing." He said, "It's just such a cool kind of odd formation." And there are other, there's caves, and you're in a mountainous terrain on the border of Tennessee and North Carolina. So there's, it's not nothing new, but it was something about how unique these rocks looked, even to Richard. They get back to the lean-to. He throws his sticks down, and he sits on the edge of the lean-to, and he's staring at his friend, and he said, "I got to tell you what just happened to me." And he tells him exactly, word for word what had happened to him, and his friend's mouth is just dropped. So he gets, tells exactly to his friend what happened. His friend's staring at him in disbelief, like total disbelief. Because he had just been there. But his friend also didn't recall that the time loss, it was, to him it only seemed like a couple of minutes. But to Richard, his friend was gone for 20, 30 minutes, same as he was. And he's like, there was a doorway. You didn't see the doorway. You didn't, fall through it. Is that where you went? He's trying to figure out, because now Richard knows that there was something there. And he's convinced that something happened to his friend. And his friend's like, "No, I didn't see anything." He said, "I just took a break, I just sat there and took a break." And he's like, "All right, he's like, "We got to start the fire." He said, "And we got to get more sticks. It's getting real, it's..." As when they started this, it was right before dusk. It was starting to get dark. Now it is almost dark. Like they both got about a half an hour left of light. So he's like, I want to get the fire going, but we're going to need more, sticks, more kindling for the night, because I'm not letting this fire die out. What I just saw, I'm not letting this fire, go out. So they get the fire going, and they walk together. And his friend, as they're walking out from the lean-to area, his friend starts to turn in the direction that formation is. And Richard's like, "Where are you going? Tomorrow we're going to have to walk by that area, but I don't want to go that way tonight." And he's like, "It's fine. It's fine." And it's just the way his friend is acting is so weird to him. Like, what do you mean it's fine? What do you mean? Like, I just told you that I just saw something, and you are telling me this is fine. So he's like, "Let's go this way." And they both kind of go in the opposite direction, but straight. He's like, "We'll kind of go this way and through, so we can at least see the lean-to. There's woods behind the lean-to. Oh, they're on the trail. If they're going to go across the trail and go into the woods, they can have the lean-to to their back and see it at least." So they get a bunch of kindling, a bunch of sticks. They get back to the camp, and they kind of stack it up, lay it out. They've got enough for the night. Richard starts another fire pit. He digs a hole because he didn't want to go and find any little rocks or anything. So he dug a hole with his spear. started another fire. So they got 2 fires about 10 feet away from the floor of the lean-to, from the beginning of the floor. So it's not underneath that kind of awning of the lean-to. And his friend's just looking at him like, Richard's got 2 heads. Richard's looking at his friend like his friend's got 2 heads. And mind you, they are still friends to this day. And Richard will bring this up and you know, say, this is how you acted. Do you remember acting like that? And his friend does not remember. He does not recall. The only thing he recalls is he doesn't recall getting the firewood. He doesn't recall going to look for Richard. He remembers walking out into the woods, finding the rock formation, and as far as he knows, coming back. Everything else is kind of a blur. Obviously, he came back, but, you know, he doesn't remember anything to this day, except for right now. This time, you know, this gap in time, almost like whatever happened to him out there scrambled his brain or memory enough to where he didn't remember X amount of time. They are eating their dinner. They had like MREs and cans of beans and that, you know, whatever light food they could pack, and real, you know, like 1 MRE a day, can of, you know, beans a day, whatever, enough to sustain them for that time. Because mind you, they had what they could carry in. They're eating and his buddy's talking to him almost like nothing went on, almost as if he had forgotten what Richard just said to him. And they kind of finish up eating, and they're sitting kind of looking at the fire and they're talking, and Richard changes the subject. He's just like, I'm not going to think about any of this. He said, I started to ask, you know, my buddy about his internship in college, if he's excited. And he said, it's getting real dark now. It's, you know, pitch black. You can't see beyond the fire. And it's, you know, we're both exhausted from staying up the night before on shifts. And they're like, they both crash. Sometime between falling asleep in this period of time, they were awoken by someone saying both of their names. And Richard remembers popping up and looking in the direction of the fire and out the lean-to. And he kind of quick looked like, and he looks at where his friend's sleeping bag would be. And his friend is out like a light, and he wakes him up. And he's like, someone just called your name. Someone called my name. Get up, get up. And his buddy looks up, gets up, and he remembers this part. So he doesn't remember from going to getting sticks and trying to find Richard and everything that happened. He remembers waking up. So it was like that 6-hour period of time that was just a blank to him. He kind of gets up and he's like, what's up? What's going on? You know, are you all right? And immediately Richard could tell that his friend was back to normal. Like there was something off with him. He said, Jeff, there was something off with him, and I know there was. He said, because when I woke him up and he sat up, we both look out of the lean-to, because as he got up, I heard for a second time both of our names. He said, and what was standing, the fire was not very big anymore. It was not coals and embers. he said it was still a flame, but it wasn't, as big as it was before we went to bed. And my friend goes, "Who the fuck is that? And what is that?" Like, instantly back to reality. His friend was just brought back to reality. And Richard goes, "That's what I saw. That's what I saw at the boulders." And his friend said, "What are you talking about? What did you see? What boulders? What are you talking about?" And Richard just shakes that off, but keeps it in the back of his head for after everything that goes down. There's that 12 to 13 foot man in this kind of like tunic looking cloth, whatever you want to call it. He can't see his eyes, but he can see. He said, "You know how if there is oil or a shiny black color and you shine a flashlight on it or light hits it, it shimmers?" He said, that's what his eyes, he said, I could see his friggin' eyes. They were black. We could make out his features because of how the fire was hitting him. The firelight would have hit him. And he said, and right next to him was that gray creature that I saw run on one side of that doorway to the other side. He said, and it's standing quadruped, staring right at us. He said, and the guy looks and says to our names, he says both of our names, and he says, "Come with me. Come with me." Like really aggressive. And they both, like, his friends, like, "Get out of here," like, "Who the fuck are you?" They're yelling. They're afraid. They're yelling. They only have spears. They're teenagers. They kind of back up put their back against the wall. They're standing now, and they can see above the fire. They can see him. They can see the dog-like creature, and the canine Dogman stands up next to this man, that 12 to 13 foot man. He said, "Jeff, that Dogman was huge." He said, but next to the man, he said it looked like, me standing next to, elementary student. So they're staring at this giant man and this dog man that is clearly smaller than the guy. And he says, come with me and live forever. Come with me. And they're both kind of like frozen in fear. And they both yell out, "Leave us alone, go away, leave us alone." And his friend starts to say the Our Father and starts to pray. And as he's praying, Richard kind of looks at his friend, and his friend's eyes are closed, and he's praying. He's got his hands kind of cusped. His spear is like between his hands. And he hears this growl from the dog man, but like a loud bellow gut laugh from the guy. And he turns around and just walks like straight into the woods beyond their lean-to. So where they had seen the rock formation, if I'm the lean-to, it would be on my right side. Left side is where they had come from the day before. Straight ahead is nothing but woods. Deep woods. Tennessee. And it just disappears. They both sit after a few minutes of kind of looking. His friend, even after the laugh, and Richard said, he's leaving. He's gone. And his friend's still praying. And he finally stops. And they both kind of look at each other. And did you see what I just saw? What the hell was that? And Richard says to his friend, that's what I saw at the rock formation. And his friend's like, what rock formation are you talking about? Like, what the hell was that? And Richard's like baffled, because it's all his friend could talk about was the rock formation and how peaceful it was and this and that. And then he had his event happen. So they're both terrified. They toss some wood on the fire and stoke the other one to get it going again. And they kind of just sit there. It's getting chilly out, it's summer, but summer nights are cold. They got their legs in their sleeping bag and they got their backs on the wall. And at some point of the evening, they both zonk out. Morning comes real early. Richard wakes up. His friend's already up, kind of sitting. He already stoked the fire, made instant coffee. And they drink their instant coffee, and they pack up all their stuff, make sure there's no garbage, they carry in, carry out. At this point of their trip, their food had dwindled. They got garbage in their packs and clothes and this and that. So they all right, we gotta go this way and let's go. Let's put as much a distance between this spot to where we need to go, but let's put miles between us. He said, so we start walking down the trail and we get to where the brush was knocked down from me and my friend walking into the woods. And I kind of nudged my friend and I'm like, that's where the rocks were. That's where that boulder formation was, down that trail that we both made. And he shakes his head again and, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't remember it. I believe that it happened, but I don't remember it. They get maybe 50 feet from that spot and they hear their names called in that aggressive baritone kind of voice. And they stop dead in their tracks and they turn. And standing on the side of the trail in the woods is a doorway, that arched doorway. And that 12 to 13 foot man standing right there. He said, and he'd called our names, so we turn and stare at it. He said, the next couple of minutes will haunt me for the rest of my life. He said, I wasn't brought up a religious person. My parents didn't go to church. It wasn't a requirement in my family. He said, but from that day on, he said, I never, ever missed a holy day or a Saturday service for the rest of my life. He said, my wife as well, up until she passed. He said, when we turned and we saw him, he was smiling at us. His teeth, we could see his teeth. We could see those just glossy black eyes, this bald head. And he smiles and his teeth are just, they both can see its teeth, the eyes. And his friend, says, Jesus, help us. Jesus, help us in the name of Christ. Save us now. Richard doesn't remember what prayer he said, but he thinks he was just saying, Jesus, kind of rebuking it in Jesus' name. And what the man, that 12 to 13 foot tall man thing, because it was a humanoid, said next, like I said, changed Richard's course of his life. He said, Jesus isn't going to save you here. Jesus isn't here. And Richard 100% believes that what he meant was in that realm where that man and that Dogman had come from. Because he didn't cross that threshold or whatever, that line between that doorway and the trail. And as he said it, he laughed. Just something terrible. It was just an evil, demonic laugh. And he said to both of them, I'll see you both sometime in your lives. Maybe at the end. And they stare at it, and all of a sudden, the guy turns around and just walks into, it's kind of hard to explain, and he said it himself. He said, Jeff, you can't imagine. It was like there was two worlds in front of me. So when he turned around and walked away, you couldn't see him. You could see him going into his world or his dimension or his realm. But beyond that, there was just the woods. He said he got to a certain point and he was gone. He said there was no light, nothing. The doorway was gone. It was back to normal, Everything looked normal again. And they just kept walking. They were terrified. So for a good couple of hours, neither one mentioned anything to each other. They camped the next night. They both kind of, you stay up for 2, you sleep. I'll stay up for 2, you sleep. Nothing happens that night after. And for the rest of their trip, nothing happens. They're both fine. Like, they both made it out of the woods alive. They weren't attacked. But when they got out of the woods and they proceeded to, drop one off to, Richard said he drove. So he said he had to drop his friend off and he went home. He said, you get cleaned up and stuff. And he said, I didn't see my buddy for a day or two. He said, but when I went back, he said, my friend said he was having nightmares about that tall, huge humanoid. He said, it was like he was in my room when I'm sleeping, staring dead in my face. He said, I'd wake up expecting him to be there, but he wasn't there. He's like, I could see his teeth. He goes, those gross, glossy black eyes. I could see those. But when I woke up, like I just said, he wasn't there. But in his subconscious, this thing's like staring down at him face to face. They make the conscious decision, both of them, to never, ever go hiking in that area again. They're not going to, they swore each other to secrecy. You do not talk about this. Whatever that was, you know, our lives are good. Let's not talk about it so it doesn't have the power to come back and, you know, mess anything up. He, like I said, has gone to church every Saturday, every holy day, before his wife died, before his wife passed away. He had made mention of this event happening to his wife years before she was, you know, years before they had kids. On her dying deathbed, she's in hospice care, and you know, he's right there with her. She says to him, you will go to heaven, but don't ever forget that demon that you saw in 1979 when you were a teenager. And he looks at his wife and he's like, what? Like, what did she, in his head, like, what did she just say? How, you know, this makes no sense. I told her years ago. How is she thinking of this at the end, you know? And shortly thereafter, she passed. And he now, the only time he does anything is to go to the grocery mart and go to church, maybe visit with his kids when they're in town, you know, whatever. But these events all really just disturbed him so much that even on calls, as you know, going on calls as a state police officer, he said, I would expect to see this thing. He goes, there was times, you know, I'd be in the woods, you know, there was a runaway one time, you know, a little girl had run away from home and she had woods behind her home. I'd have to go, he goes, and I expected to see this thing. His friend proceeded to push policies and whatever within the government of North Carolina to kind of fund the upkeep of some of the lean-tos that are out there on North Carolina's state line. And his friend now, as Richard had explained everything to him, his friend still to this day does not remember seeing that boulder formation. He only remembers seeing that creature, whatever you want to call it, and that was it. I mean, and it's just, was it a demon? Was it a giant? Was that hell? What do you mean by Jesus isn't here? Richard believes that he saw hell, and quite possibly that thing was a demon. But why would it be in the middle of Nowhere, North Carolina, Swain County, North Carolina. Border is right there, you know? Like, it makes no sense to him still to this day. And Jesus isn't here. Was it hell? And the reason why he wanted to share all that and shared it is, one, he, I think, needed to get it out. Because our conversation was really a decent conversation. But I could tell, like, when it was over and he shared it, and he shared certain things, like, you could hear his energy level rise when he mentioned the portals, when he mentioned seeing this creature. I have no better word for it. Demon, Nephilim, giant creature, whatever. None of this made sense to him. None of it, and still doesn't to this day. But his wife was very religious. He's very religious and spiritual, you know. He believes that the word of Christ can save people 100%, and I agree with him 100% on that. You know, when my dad was in palliative care, I said so many prayers. I gave up saying them. And then a month later, I started saying them again. And I got my faith back. Dad got better. Prayer does work. Was that a demon? I think so. I think. And then we talked and I was like, what do you think about, what if it was one of the fallen angels? Because they didn't fall, you know, they're just called fallen angels because they fell from grace, from God's grace. They didn't fall from heaven to earth. They just fell from God's grace. What if that creature like humanoid was one of the fallen angels here? It makes no sense, you know. I think that was hell. I think he saw hell. His friend still to this day doesn't remember seeing the boulders. How does his wife know? After years of never talking about it, and his wife knew. And why, if it was a demon, would it be in the middle of fucking nowhere, North Carolina? You know, if this happened in upstate New York, I'd say in the same thing, like Vermont, New York border. I'd say nowhere, New York. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not insulting that area. I'm saying there's nothing there. It's just in the middle. Did he do something wrong to have this creature or whatever it was attracted to him, or did his friend? But the scariest statement, the scariest part of this whole experience was that one line. Jesus isn't here and he cannot help you here. What if his friend did, you know, kind of fall into hell? I don't know. Richard doesn't know. But it's fucking scary.
And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed tonight's second bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.